Well, hey friends, welcome back to our big B word conversations. And today's word is one that brings up a lot of emotion, maybe some resistance, maybe some misunderstanding. And we've talked about it quite a bit here on the podcast, but it's been a while. So let's revisit it. Today we're talking about boundaries, but not boundaries as control, as walls, as ultimatums. We're going to talk today about boundaries as capacity. Because most women I work with don't struggle with boundaries because they're selfish or harsh or uncaring. They struggle because they care deeply. They're responsible, they're capable, and they're used to carrying a lot. And somewhere along the way, boundaries got confused with being mean or dramatic or too much. So today I want to reframe boundaries in a way that feels grounded, honest, and sustainable for your business, for your relationships, your parenting, and your own nervous system. Welcome to the Life Coaching for Mompreneurs podcast, where you will learn simple solutions to win at work without losing at home. Hi, my name is Martine Williams, and I'm your host and CEO, your Chief Encouragement Officer. And this podcast is your one-stop shop to creating a burnout-proof life and business by elevating your clarity, confidence, and courage. Friends, it's time to say goodbye to being the yes girl, to procrastinating on your goals and living in overwhelm. And it's time to say hello to creating healthy boundaries, healthy mindsets, and healthy habits so that you can achieve work-life harmony. Your next breakthrough starts here. This is the Life Coaching for Mompreneurs podcast. Let's do this. So let's clear up something right away about what boundaries are and what they're not. And I remember a time in my life where setting boundaries, the very first book I read was Boundaries by Dr. Henry Cloud. If you've not read that, it's amazing. He has multiple versions of it for different parts of your life. But I just remember personally feeling like that I was going to be the mean girl and that it was all about the other person, like shutting them out and giving them a wall or an ultimatum or a punishment or just a way to get people to behave differently. So that didn't work very well for me to think of it in that way. So when I read that book, really changed my life when it came to boundaries. I was in a season where I was a new mom, pretty newly married, I would say at the same time. And so lots of changes and transitions and handling family members and their reactions to the changes. And it was just a really hard time to be able to be confident in myself and my decisions, which is what a boundary is. It's the decision you make to protect your capacity, to protect what you want. They're not something that you explain perfectly. Listen, there were so many times, and even now, where I explain a boundary very messy. There's something that you honor consistently, though. And a boundary may sound like, this is what I can give right now, or this no longer fits in this season. I'm not available for this anymore. And the key distinction is a boundary doesn't control other people. It clarifies you. If you're trying to control other people, that's more of like codependency. And I've gone that route too. And like, if I could just say it this way and, in 100 other different ways, maybe they will change. So my focus was all about the other person and controlling the other person, but that's not what a boundary does. It clarifies you. So when you think about a boundary line around your home, it's very clear when someone comes into your boundary and when they don't, right? When they come onto your property, you know what that is. And you also know the consequence to that behavior. So how healthy boundaries actually work is just a really simple framework that I actually learned a couple of years ago when I got certified in the life coach tools. And a lot of women think that they're bad at boundaries when really they've just never been taught what a healthy one actually is. And there's two parts to it. The first one is the request. This is where you clearly name what isn't working for you, not from a place of anger or defensiveness, just honestly. And for work, it might sound like I'm not available for work conversations after 6, right? Or I need more notice before committing to this. Like I just did this the other night because I don't know if your kids have a way of doing this, but like they have this idea and they want to do it and they want you to like decide right away. And part of it's my personality. I have high pace in my personality, so I like to think things through. I like predictability. I don't like sudden changes. So in that communication and boundary with them, like I finally was like, I don't think I've ever told them that. They just think that I'm putting it off or what for whatever reason. So I communicated to them that it's not that I'm being mean or trying to like prolong the decision. I just need more time to think about it before I commit to it or before I say yes. Another one could just be this doesn't work for me anymore. And then the second part is the consequence. And there's so many examples of this, and I'll try to give as many as I can of this process throughout the podcast. But the second part is the consequence. And this is where boundaries often get misunderstood. A consequence is not a punishment. It's not about threatening, and it's not about controlling the other person's behavior. A consequence is simply what you will do if the boundary isn't respected. And when I learned this in like to my core, this felt so much more, I don't want to say easier, but I wasn't trying to control the other person. I wasn't trying to punish the other person. I wasn't trying to prove my point and be right because I have that tendency in my personality. There's a right way to do something, a wrong way to do something. So it's just, if you, then I will. If you continue with this behavior, then I will. You can keep doing it if you want, but here's going to be my response. Here's going to be the consequence to that. And I'm able to state that in such a calm way, in such a like grounded, assured way that it just feels better for me. Now they're going to have their own response to it, and you're not responsible for how they respond to it. And I think that's what we're most worried about when we set boundaries. So for example, if emails keep coming in after hours, I'll respond the next business day. That's you stating after 6 p.m., I'm going to respond the next business day. I'm not going to respond every time you send me a message or every time you send me, I'm not at your beck and call. So if you contact me outside of the hours, I'll respond the next business day. And you're teaching people that if you do this, I'm going to do this. If this continues, I'll need to step back from this role, right? If you continue to speak poorly to me or about me, then I'm going to step back from this role. If you continue to micromanage me, so it's like they can continue to micromanage and do all the things, but you're saying what you're going to do, what you can control. If this doesn't change, I'll adjust my availability. One of the examples that they gave in the life coach certification was like a friend who's always late, right? Like that's the simplest of things. But if you're like me, I was raised to be there. If you're on time, you're late. So I always got to everything 15 minutes early. I still do. I can't stand to be late. I was actually late this morning to my workout and I was stressing out the whole way there. But for someone who's habitually late, you can just simply say, hey, I really want to have lunch with you. However, if you're going to be longer than 15 minutes late, I'm going to go ahead and leave. And then you just have to do it, right? That's the hard part, is actually holding the line, doing what you say you're going to do. But she can keep showing up late if she wants to. You're not trying to control that. You're just telling her, if this, then I will. So I really want you to take that away from this episode, is thinking about it in that way, the two-part method. Hey friend, let's talk. It's time to book your clarity call. We are going to spend 1 full hour focused on you. A clarity call isn't about pressure. It's about possibilities. It's about you. You having a space to talk through what's on your heart and mind, you walking away with a clear vision and practical next steps, and you feeling confident in what's next and how to get there. You don't need to have it all figured out. That's my job. All you need to do is show up, and we'll figure it out together. This is the best hour you can invest in yourself right now. Not in 6 months from now, not next month, right now. And don't just take my word for it. Here's what one of my coaching clients had to say after working together.
Working with Martine has been such a blessing to not only my business, but to my personal life as well. I went from lacking confidence to being able to stand tall and proud of my work and life.
That transformation, it starts with one conversation. It's time to stop spinning your wheels and start making real progress. So head right now to martinewilliams.com or in the show notes and grab your private clarity call spot on my calendar before they're gone. And since I personally monitor my inbox, if you don't see a time slot that fits your calendar, just send me an email at martine@martinewilliams.com with free times that do work, and I will make it work for you. All right, friend, let's get back to the show. So I want you to notice something here. You're not telling them what they have to do. You're taking responsibility for what you will do. And that's self-leadership. You can only control you, your thoughts, your words, and your actions. You cannot control other people. And if that's something that you struggle with, or I get it, I understand it, I've tried it, and it almost took me out trying to get someone to change their behavior. So, why boundaries feel so uncomfortable? Here's why this feels hard for so many of you and why it's been hard for me, because setting boundaries risks discomfort. You might disappoint somebody. Yep, you might. You might make someone uncomfortable. Pretty sure you probably will. You might be misunderstood. That one's a hard one for me. And might not be liked in the moment. I remember setting a boundary with a family member and then looking across from me at lunch and telling me I was selfish. A very important person in my life. And I remember thinking, wow, it was so uncomfortable. At the same time, I knew it was like I was so grounded in my decision, and I knew it was what was right for me and my family. And this person was just going to have to figure it out. And this was like way before I have the coaching skills and the experience that I have today. And I can vividly remember that person's response and then going home and crying my eyes out. But I held to that, right? And then I had to hold to it after they were having their moment. And it took a while for this person to honor that boundary or understand that boundary. And many of us avoid boundaries because we don't want to risk losing the relationship. And that's a real thing. So instead of they stay in the relationship built on resentment. You're resenting doing this thing or showing up this way or this person doing this. You're pretending that it's okay, that you enjoy it, that you like it, that it doesn't bother you, that it's okay. You might be over-functioning, unspoken expectations. So for a lot of high-achieving women, boundaries feel risky. You might worry, like, if they're upset, what if I disappoint them? What if this changes their relationship? What if I look selfish or difficult? So instead of setting that boundary, again, we tolerate it. We overextend, we explain, we justify. And we hope people will just notice that something's off or that we're overwhelmed. And when they don't, this is where the resentment builds. And it builds and it builds and it builds and it builds until you can't carry the resentment anymore. And then it comes out sideways, which doesn't go well for anyone. So here's the truth, and the part that I want you to hear is that avoiding boundaries doesn't preserve the intimacy, it actually prevents it. Real intimacy requires honesty. And that could be with your kids, that could be with yourself, that could be with a coworker. And honesty requires courage. And when you honor yourself and tell the truth calmly and respectfully, you allow relationships to be real instead of performative. And the shift that I want you to think about is, again, boundaries aren't about managing other people's reactions. They're about managing your own capacity. Every time you think about a relationship or another person being in a relationship, like the only thing you can control is you. There is so much power when you just get that. There is so much freedom when you just get that and live that out on a daily basis. I'm not saying it's easy to do. It's not. Especially when you see the solution, right? And you see, oh, if they would just do this, things would be better. If they would just do that, things would be better. Like, I can see what the problem is here, and they're still not doing it. You can't control them. All you can do is state, if this, then I will. So one of the most powerful reframes I heard or learned is that boundaries, again, are not just for you. They're actually for the other person too, because often people don't even realize that they've crossed the line. They don't know how you're feeling. They don't know what's costing you energy, if we're talking about capacity at this point. Boundaries bring clarity. They give people information, right? If there were no boundaries in our properties, people wouldn't know whose property was what, right? And then there would be a lot of disrespect, a lot of miscommunication, a lot of misunderstanding here. So boundaries bring clarity to you, and then you can give that information to other people. And the hard but freeing part is that other people don't have to agree with your boundary. Sorry, but they don't have to agree with your boundary. They don't even have to understand it. Your job is not to convince them. Your job is to honor what's true for you. Again, they don't even have to understand it. It's not your job to convince them. It's your job to honor what's true for you and speak that clearly. Because when boundaries are set from self-respect and not anger, you can tell the truth without attacking, without yelling, without over-explaining. That's emotional maturity. That's leadership. That's capacity in action. So boundaries, again, are not about managing other people's reactions. They're about managing your own integrity. So you have to get clear first. What is the target? What are the behaviors that you are willing to tolerate and not willing to tolerate? What are the things that you can say yes to and that you need to say no to? You have to get clear on that first so that then you can communicate it out and then you can implement on it. If you're trying to use a boundary to control someone else's behavior or avoid a conversation or escape discomfort, that's not boundary work. That's outsourcing your self-leadership. So healthy boundaries start with ownership, and they ask, what do I need? What do you need? What are you responsible for? What action am I willing to take if nothing changes? Not how do I make them stop? How do I get them to understand? Boundaries don't change people. They change how you show up. They show up how you lead yourself. So some signs, I thought this might be helpful, that like you're not ready yet to set the boundary, and that's okay. This may be uncomfortable, but it's important. You might not be ready to set a boundary if you're blaming the other person still. If you're trying to manipulate an outcome. If you're hoping they'll change so you don't have to, or you don't have to address the situation. You're ready to explode instead of speak. If you need to go put yourself in timeout for a couple of days, and so you can come back and calmly come back to the truth and not make an emotional reaction at the time, then do it. That doesn't mean don't set boundaries. That's not what I'm saying. It means regulate first. Regulate yourself first. Feel all the feelings, the anger, the frustration, the disappointment. Feel all the feelings first, misunderstood, and then allow them to move. Get yourself regulated, and then come back with that clear, concise voice. Because boundaries set from resentment create distance. Boundaries set from clarity create trust. It's very clear. Quick pause. If you've been listening and you're ready to stop performing your life and start leading it, if you know you're ready to feel better now, not later, and you're ready for support that actually creates sustainable transformation, I have private one-on-one coaching spots open. And inside this coaching, in Illuminate You coaching, we don't guess. We use your unique personality blueprint built from the science-backed personality and performance tool called the ProScan, the one you've heard me talk about here in the podcast. This is used so that every decision, every boundary, every shift is designed specifically around your wiring, not someone else's. This is my aligned success method. It's not hacks. It's not try harder. It's not mindset glitter. It's a real solution. It's rooted in science, strategy, and your unique design. So you can lead your life as the woman you actually are, not the woman others expect you to be. Now is the time. Take the step. Book your clarity call at martinewilliams.com/clarity. All right, back to the episode. So some questions you might ask before you set the boundary, before the conversation, before the text, before you draw that line in the sand. Ask yourself, what can I learn about myself here? What do I need to know about myself here first? Where have I maybe been unclear or inconsistent? Right? Maybe you've not clearly stated the boundary. Maybe you haven't consistently held the boundary, and so there's confusion. What would it look like to tell the truth without attacking? Again, that's getting you back to a grounded state. And how can I care for myself and still honor the relationship? This goes back to being the mean girl. Like, how can I care for myself and my own capacity and still honor the relationship First and foremost with self, and secondly with everyone else. You can do both. It doesn't have to be one or the other. I'm either the yes girl or I'm the mean girl. Nope, that's not how it works. Especially in marriage, parenting, or leadership, boundaries aren't about burning bridges. They're about building relationships that can hold honesty, that you can communicate honesty. And I don't like conflict. I really don't. And I was at a conference earlier this week, and we did some like team building activities. And one of the questions that they threw up on the screen, and we had to kind of like, there were two lines and you had to move the lines. So each question was a different person. And the question was, how do you handle conflict? This was leadership conference. And I mean, my first question was, I changed that word. Like, I don't like to think of it as a conflict. I like to think of it as a conversation. And just that shift in language for me, it still might be a hard conversation, but for me to think I'm going into conflict is like I'm going into battle. And so I got to arm up, right? And I got to be defensive and ready to defend myself. And I think it just changes the energy in which you show up to that conversation. That's not always possible in every situation, but for me, I'm not going to think of it as conflict. So if you're thinking of boundaries as conflict, could you think about it as just an honest conversation? And how does that change it for you? This matters so much because, again, boundaries set from resentment create distance. Boundaries set from clarity create that trust. And when you can't honor yourself without attacking, when you can't tell the truth without blame, when you can't hold your line without needing approval, that's not just boundary work. That's that emotional maturity. That's that leadership. That's the capacity. And boundaries are not about cutting people off. They're not about keeping people out. They're about keeping you together. And they're about cutting through confusion and starting with yourself on what is it that I need here. So some real life examples of boundaries in business. Boundaries protect your energy, your focus, your decision making. If your calendar doesn't reflect your capacity, burnout follows. So boundaries may sound like honoring your work hours, especially for all my mompreneurs out there. Like, what are your work hours? Do you have work hours? It might be in between nap times. It might be in the nooks and crannies of time with raising babies. I get it. I've done it. But there needs to be some boundaries around that. Protecting your creative time. Fridays are kind of my free flow, giving my brain some space to think and create and just be more so than do. That's been my kind of like in my calendar for years. Not saying yes out of guilt. Boundaries sound like saying yes, not saying yes out of guilt, not being the yes girl because you're afraid of how guilty you're going to feel. It's leading instead of rescuing. How many of you are like the Miss Dependable? I'm going to swoop in there and rescue everyone and fix everything. Boundaries is like, that's not for me to carry. That's not for me to figure out. I got enough to figure out here within myself. That's not for me to figure out. In marriage, boundaries create real intimacy, not distance. They sound like naming needs instead of building that resentment. Like you have these needs that are unmet and you're not communicating them. This is an ongoing thing. I feel like just in the different seasons of my marriage, we just celebrated 25, will be 26 years this year. And it's still something that I struggle with, voicing what it is that I need. I've gotten way better at it. And every time I do, and every time he does, it does create so much more connection and intimacy. Asking for support instead of silently keeping score. So with all of the grief and the sadness and everything that I've been going through, I've just been really honest about, okay, I know you don't like to see me sad. I know you want to try to fix it. But right now, I just need you to sit with me. So that's kind of like, I need you to do this. Asking for that support instead of just silently, keeping score on all the ways that he's not giving me that support. Being honest without blaming. That's what boundary sounds like in a marriage. Being honest without blaming. They don't have to go together. In parenting, boundaries teach regulation. They teach respect, responsibility. Like, we're the model, right? Our kids are looking at us on how we care for ourselves, how we handle stress, how we handle difficult conversations. We're teaching our kids how to care for themselves, how to handle their emotions, how to respect others' limits. Boundaries aren't rejection, they're instruction for our kids to show them, right? So as we wrap up, let me ask just a few honest questions. Where are you overextended right now? What are you tolerating that's costing you energy? What boundary have you been avoiding because you don't want to rock the boat? And what would protecting your capacity actually look like with regards to boundaries? They're not being harsh. Boundaries are not about being harsh. You can present boundaries and be harsh, but that's not what they're really about. They're about being honest. Honest with yourself first, and then honest with the other person. Boundaries aren't about cutting people off. They're about cutting through the confusion, starting with yourself. And I've said that multiple times in different ways throughout this episode because I want you to really take in that this all starts with you. And once you understand that, boundaries stop feeling like confrontation and they start feeling like self-respect. You don't need stronger boundaries, you need clearer ones, most of us. And that clarity always starts within. So if this episode stirred something for you and you want support navigating boundaries in a grounded, personalized way through a clarity call, I want to invite you to go and book that at martinewilliams.com/clarity. This is a really important feature of the Pro Scan. We don't do that on the clarity call, but if you decide you want to come into the coaching and we do your Pro Scan, it really helps a lot with the boundaries because you are so clear now on who you are, how you operate, what are the things that drain your energy, give you energy, and you're able to make those, create those boundaries with so much more confidence. You don't feel like the mean girl anymore. You don't feel like you're disappointing. Well, you might still feel like you're disappointing people sometime, but as you practice it and as you see, you're like, oh, okay, this is the boundary that I need to create now, right? From a place of self-leadership, not from like resentment and anger and trying to control the other person. So that's all I have for you today. This is I think our third big word conversation. I hope you're enjoying them. And again, if you want to connect with me, you can send me a DM on Instagram at Martine31Williams. You can also go to the show notes or go to martinewilliams.com/clarity and book your free clarity call. All right, friends, I will catch you on the next episode. Well, that's a wrap, friends. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. I really hope it met you right where you are and gave you some encouragement for your day. Could you do me the biggest favor and leave me a rating and review? Seriously, it's the best way for you to support the show. And while you're there, be sure to follow the show so you never miss an episode. Thanks again. And until next time, I am believing in you always.